Okay, complete the square for each of the following quadratic expressions. X squared minus x minus 6. So the first thing we do is we ensure that the coefficient of x squared is always 1, which it is. The coefficient of x squared here is 1. So we then proceed as follows. Write out the first two terms. We add a bracket squared and then subtract that same bracket squared, and do it in this order. Don't deviate from that. What goes into this bracket is half the coefficient of x. The coefficient of x is -1. So half of -1 is minus a half. So we put minus a half inside the brackets. The first three terms, as we've written them, that's why it's important to write this in the order that I've said. The first three terms form a perfect square trinomial. What goes into that bracket will be that term over there and whatever we've put inside the brackets. So we'll have x minus a half, and then minus 6 minus, multiply this bracket out a quarter, that equals x is so x minus a half all squared minus 25/4 is called completing the square form or turning point form. And you'll see where this is used when we do the quadratic function. And number 2, x squared plus 3x. The first thing we do is ensure that the coefficient of x squared is 1. Now for the whole of question 1, the coefficient of x squared is going to be 1. So we're not going to refer to that anymore, because every question in question 1, there's 10 questions, will have the coefficient of x squared being 1. So we're just going to proceed straight to the second step. Question 2, we'll have to ensure that the coefficient of x squared is 1. But we'll get to that when we get to question 2. So the first step is to write down the first two terms. We add a bracket squared, and then we subtract a bracket squared, right? There is no other term here, right? So it looks slightly different to the question we did previously. What goes into this bracket, into both of those brackets, is half the coefficient of x. So half of plus 3 is 3/2. The first three terms, and it's important that you have this order correct, the first three terms will give a perfect square trinomial. What goes into that bracket will be that over there, x and 3/2. So we'll have x plus 3/2 all squared minus, and then we can multiply this out. That's going to be 9/4. So this is now what is called completing the square form or turning point form. Okay, x squared plus 3x minus 54. The coefficient of x squared is 1, so we're going to go straight to the second step. X squared plus 3x, we add a bracket squared, then we put in that term minus 54, and we subtract that same bracket squared. So in the bracket we put half the coefficient of x, so half of 3 is 3/2. The first three terms form a perfect square trinomial, so open up brackets and square it. The terms we put inside the bracket is the x and 3/2. So x plus 3/2 minus, and then we just calculate this, minus 54 minus 9/4. So that's x plus 3/2 all squared minus 225/4. This is now completing the square form or turning point form. Number 4, x squared minus 4x minus 21 equals, the coefficient of x squared is 1. So we proceed by writing down the first two terms. Then we add a bracket squared, minus 21, and then we subtract that same bracket squared. Inside that bracket is half the coefficient of x, so half of minus 4 is minus 2. We put that into the brackets. The first three terms form a perfect square trinomial. Open up your brackets and square. What goes in to those brackets is the x and whatever we've put inside the bracket, minus 2. So x minus 2 minus 21 minus 2 squared is 4. So that equals x minus 2 all squared minus 25. This is now in turning point form, or completing the square form. And number 5, x squared plus 5x. The coefficient of x squared is 1. So we proceed, write down the first two terms. There's only two terms. Add a bracket squared, and then subtract that same bracket squared. The first three terms, okay, before we get there, half the coefficient of x, the coefficient of x is 5, half of 5 is 5 over 2. So 5 over 2 goes into the brackets. The first three terms form a perfect square trinomial. The terms we put into those brackets is the x and whatever's inside that bracket, 5 over 2. So x plus 5 over 2 minus, we multiply this out, 25 over 4. This is now completing the square or turning point form. Number 6, x squared plus 13x plus 42. So x squared plus 13x, write down the first two terms. Add a bracket squared, then you add 42, then subtract the bracket squared. What goes into the bracket is half the coefficient of x. Half of 13 is 13 over 2. And notice in all of these we do not use decimals. We are no longer using decimals whatsoever. Everything is a fraction. The first three terms form a perfect square trinomial. X plus 13 over 2 all squared plus 42 minus 169 over 4. That equals x plus 13 over 2 all squared minus a quarter. This is now turning point form or completing the square form. Okay, so the first thing we do is we need to ensure that the coefficient of x squared is 1. The coefficient of x squared is 3. So we have to divide every term by this coefficient of 3. Open up square brackets and write down the remaining terms. So 3x squared divided by 3 is x squared, minus 5x divided by 3 is minus 5/3 x. Okay, the next thing we do, we proceed as normal. So write down the first two terms, then add a bracket squared. There is no other term, so we just subtract that same bracket squared. What goes into that bracket is half the coefficient of x, so half of minus 5/3. So minus 5/3 times our half is minus 5 over 6. So minus 5 over 6 goes into the brackets. The first three terms form a perfect square trinomial. What goes into the bracket will be those terms over there. So we'll have x minus 5 over 6 minus, and then we multiply this out, 25 over 36. We now bring the 3 into the square brackets. So it's 3 times x minus 5 over 6 all squared minus 25 over 12. This is now completing the square form or turning point form. 2x squared minus x minus 6. The coefficient of x squared is 2, not 1. So we take out the 2, divide every term by 2, and we have 2 times x squared minus a half x minus 3. Okay, we now are going to write down the first 2 terms. We're going to add a bracket squared, then minus 3, then subtract that same bracket squared. Inside this bracket is half the coefficient of x, so half of minus a half. Minus a half times a half is minus a quarter. So we put minus a quarter in the brackets. The first 3 terms form a perfect square trinomial. So open up round brackets and square it. What goes into that bracket will be the x and whatever's inside the bracket, minus a quarter. So x minus a quarter. Then we can simplify this. Minus 3 minus 1 over 16. That's 2 times x minus a quarter squared minus 49 over 16. And then we can bring the 2 into the square bracket. So 2 times x minus quarter squared minus 49 over 8. This is now in completing the square form or turning point form. 7x squared minus 43x minus 42 equals, the coefficient of x squared is not 1, it's 7, so we divide every term by this coefficient, 7. Then we have x squared minus 43 over 7x minus 6. Then write down the first 2 terms. We add a bracket squared, then subtract 6, and then subtract that same bracket squared. Inside that bracket is half the coefficient of x, so half of minus 43 over 7. Minus 43 over 7 times a half is minus 43 over 14. Minus 43 over 14 goes into both brackets. The first 3 terms form a perfect square trinomial. So open up round brackets and square it. Terms that go in are that term and that term. So x minus 43 over 14 minus 6 minus, and we can just use a calculator for that. That's 7 times x minus 43 over 14 squared, and we can just simplify that. Then we can bring the 7 in. 7 times x minus 43 over 14 squared minus 3025 over 28. This is now in completing the form or turning point form. Completing the square form or turning point form.